Joining me now in the foyer, James Bezan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. Hélène Lavallière is the NDP Deputy Foreign Affairs Critic, and Joyce Murray is the Liberal Defence Critic. All of you, good to see you here. Mr. Bezan, was DND instructed not to cooperate with the Parliamentary Budget Officer in providing what they believe are basic information about the mission?
Not at all. Evan, we said right from the start that we're going to be open, transparent, and accountable, and we are doing that. We are tabling estimates on Thursday. Mr. Kenney announced that that's going to be $122 million. That's the hard number. We know what it is costing us now that we've set operational tempo. We knew the biggest cost was in the deployment of troops and equipment. And so now all that has been able to be accounted for, and it's there. And it's there to support our Canadian Armed Forces and making sure that they have the resources, the equipment, and are paid well for the job that we've tasked them to do in fighting this ISIL genocide that has taken place throughout Iraq. And of course, we know that ISIL has declared war on us here in Canada.
Okay, but let me focus on disclosure. And I'm going to show our viewers this interview I did with the Assistant Parliamentary Budget Officer, Mustafa Askari, but I spoke to him in detail. The PBO says they couldn't get information about the composition and characteristics of personnel, the amount of ammunition used, the amount of flying hours for various air assets. In fact, they said basic information that was not remotely cabinet confidence. Their definition, by the way, if it shows up in another document that's not cabinet confident, it should be in the public. And I said, is it getting worse or is it getting better in terms of transparency and getting information about the mission? Here's what he told me.
This one was particularly bad relative to the previous issues that we had with the Department of National Defense. I think we got some information for F-35, we got some information for joint support ships projects, but this one was particularly bad.
So it's getting worse?
It's getting worse.
What's the government's response? The Parliamentary Budget Officer says it's getting worse. They're getting less information than before, not more.
As Mr. Kenney has said, as we've talked about before, that we're not going to disclose things that might impact operational security or would be in violation of cabinet secrecy. So those things are still secret, but I can tell you that in the $122 million that we have tabled, or will be tabling on Thursday in the House of Commons, will provide the numbers as it applies to Operation Impact without going into the details that are going to compromise the operations of our Canadian Armed Forces in Iraq.
But I want to be clear on this. The government keeps saying it's cabinet confidence, we can't disclose. In fact, originally, I remember, and you remember, when the last Defense Minister Nicholson was there, he said we'll disclose it at the end of the mission. Yesterday, suddenly, the department decided to release the $122 million with no context, mind you, the day before the PBO's number. Again, why does the PBO say this is not cabinet confident, it does not jeopardize security? And by the way, they also say you're violating parliamentary law. You have to release it to them. Why the lack of disclosure?
We're doing full disclosure, as you're going to see when we table on Thursday, and it's actual numbers. It's not making assumptions. It's not crystal balling. These are the actual numbers that's going to be required to take us through to the end of March 31st. We said we'd report back in a normal parliamentary process, and that's what we're doing. And now that we know what we're going to be tabling on Thursday, immediately Minister Kenney released that data.
All right, let me get Hélène Lavallière. By the way, I know your party has accused them of not disclosing. You know, and Terry Milewski just pointed it out. The numbers aren't that far off in terms of the difference. What's your view of the cost estimates?
Well, the numbers are not that far off, but the PBO says that there's elements that he couldn't include in his analysis just because he didn't get the information from the Department of National Defense. So it's very difficult for the PBO to work under those circumstances. And I really don't understand when I hear talking about full disclosure. We've asked for those numbers for months now. In the US, you know, people have access, government respect its citizen and provide them with the information.
But to be fair, the low number of the PBO is only $6 million off the government's number. So why don't you trust the government's numbers and wait till they table the estimates on Thursday?
Well, from past experience, I would tend to see that the PBO has his finger more on the dot, on the real number, usually, than the government. And what we must remember also is the PBO underlines that, you know, the final cost in Libya was 6 times the cost of the first estimates or the supplementary cost. But the truth is that the difference between the minimum of the PBO and what the government says is not that huge.
Right,
between the maximum, and also because there are elements that the PBO couldn't include in its analysis.
I want to get to Joyce Moore, but I want to just be fair to everyone here on the Libyan cost of the mission. Peter MacKay originally said it was $50 million. He was talking about the incremental cost. It turned out to be $100 million. You're saying eventually the full cost was $350 million. I just want to be fair to everyone. Incremental costs, which is what the Parliamentary Budget Officer and Jason Kenney both have revealed, those are the costs above and beyond whatever costs would have been spent usually. So we're measuring incremental costs, not incremental to full cost, just so we don't do apples and oranges. But Joyce Murray, when you talk about the difference, it's not a huge difference. Do the Liberals have a problem with this?
I think, yes, I do have a problem with the process, especially, Evan. This is a government that has refused to provide cost estimates, unlike the United States.
Because we want to be on actual
and
costs.
unlike the Australia, whose governments provided detailed cost estimates through Parliament to the public. So what is this? What are the Conservatives hiding here?
Nothing.
And secondly, the opposition members had to go to the public. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, whose very purpose is to dig through detailed cost information and help us be able to let the public know how their tax dollars are being spent. And I'll quote from his report, he said that every single request for detailed data was refused. So that may well be against the law. Why is the government deceiving the public by saying they're being transparent when in fact they're stonewalling parliamentarians, they're stonewalling the officer of Parliament whose job it is to put this information forward?
So let's get Mr. Bezan. Mr. Bezan, part of this, the PBO says they couldn't get information. The Department of Defense sent us a statement responding to the PBO saying, quote, the Department of National Defense has and will continue to provide the PBO with information that he needs to do his job within the mandate Parliament has given him. As per our correspondence with the PBO, December 23rd, 2014, some of the information requested was deemed to be a cabinet confidence and could not be released at that time. The problem, sir, is that the Parliamentary Budget Officer doesn't believe that what's being called cabinet confidence, those estimates are not cabinet confidence at all. They don't qualify as that term is being misused to hide the cost. What do you say to that?
It's not being used to hide the cost because we're reporting the cost, and we want to report actual costs, so we said right from the start. You already made the example on Libya that the estimate didn't match up to the actual cost. So that's why we wanted to make sure that what we're putting out there are the actual facts. We didn't know when we were going into this, especially back in December, what operational tempo was going to be. We had some weeks that we had hardly any sorties going out, and we can actually, we know that the most expensive part of Operation Impact is the flights and the cost of munitions.
So why not just give that stuff to
that you
PBO?
have the actual cost. Well, at that time, we were still in the estimate process, and how do you base anything on fact? And so even for the PBO to come up with any numbers, he was, again, is making extrapolations, and we want to be working on facts, and we want to make sure that cabinet secrets and confidences and operational security are not compromised in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, well, the PBO wanted they believe those are facts. I got you all for a minute, and I got to get to this. I want to shift today to reports that Hezbollah, the leader in Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah, is calling on all Mideast countries to join the fight against ISIS. Mr. Bezan, Canada considers them a terrorist organization. They are funded by Iran. Your government's been very outspoken about this. But now they say they want to fight ISIS, is this the case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
They're definitely not our friends. Hezbollah and the Iranian regime, for that matter, are enemies to Israel. They have been destabilizing the Middle East for years. They've been supporting the Assad regime and the genocide that he's committed in Syria. So there's no way that we're going to be working alongside any of these organizations. They are a terrorist organization, and they see ISIL as a threat. Well, they're going to deal with that in their own way, I guess. But we're going to continue to focus on working with the Kurdish Peshmerga and the Iraqi security forces to take on this ISIL threat and make sure that that genocide does not spread and that we can stop it and make sure that it's not a threat to our own security here in Canada.
So this is, and let me go to Alain Laverdiere and Joyce Murray. I mean, this is kind of interesting because you've got Iran who wants to fight ISIS and might get more active, and now you got Hezbollah, a deemed terrorist organization, that want to do that. How do you respond to that kind of thing, Alain Laverdiere?
Well, we see how complicated is the situation, and in fact, what it reminds me is the fact that the government said that they wouldn't go into Syria. There were a lot of questions about whether they would ask the authorities in Syria to intervene there. So it makes for kind of strange bedfellows, and I think it speaks to the complexity of the situation.
Okay, but what do you do about it? Well, Alain Laverdiere, I mean, saying this in the Middle East is complicated.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how far that gets you. Yes. Okay. We all agree. What do you do about it?
Well, first you tread carefully, and that's what we've been saying all along about this mission, that you don't just jump in
we're going to save
and you
people.
have to tread carefully and in a transparent manner. Regarding Hezbollah, I mean, of course, it's I don't think you want to go there, but we've seen Jordan reacting, and we've seen Egypt reacting to, and so basically.
Okay. I'm going to go to Joyce Murray, but I'm not 100% sure I could discern a position there. Joyce Murray, what do you do about Hezbollah or Iran if they want to join the fight against ISIS?
Well, we have to be very careful how we support the coalition and careful that equipment doesn't fall into the wrong hands, Evan. Yeah. I think that this really highlights the importance of being able to trust Canada's leadership around this mission, and we simply haven't had the transparency, we haven't had the forthright answers, not on the character of the mission with the special forces that were promised to be behind the wire. Apparently there was a change in the mission. We went through all that a few weeks ago, and we simply cannot trust to have an open and forthright conversation with this
They've got to
government.
remember, Evan, that
Not
the NDP and the Liberals are opposed to us being there and saving innocent lives and making sure that this security threat doesn't come to our shores.
As our parliamentary secretary knows, the Liberals supported that Canada be part of the coalition.
On October 2nd, 5 days before the motion was passed, they're making it up as they go along here.
We had some different opinions about how Canada can best contribute.
Dropping blankets, that's what they suggested.
Okay, I can't hear y'all. I know the Liberals, we've had this battle before. Yes, you voted for the original idea to send people originally, but when the motion came, actually the Liberals did not support it.
Not at all.
All right, but they did support the early one, just to be fair. All right, James Bezan, Alain Laverdiere, and Joyce Murray. No, I'm just stating the facts, how they rolled out. You guys can make the politics of it.
Well, we'll talk about that another time, Evan, but Justin Trudeau never even mentioned it until October 2nd when we're already dealing with the motion in the House.
All right, I got to leave it there. Don't worry, we'll have lots more time to cover this. I want to thank all of you for coming on, and I want to bring our audience